So we come with a humble heart, feeling remorse for whatever's happened and transpired in our lives, knowing that God is a forgiving and loving God. Now Paul, he gives us instruction also in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And through there he gives us the way that Jesus kept the Lord's Supper. From verse 23 on, it says, I received of the Lord that which I also delivered to you. That the same night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread, and after he gave thanks, he broke the bread, and he went through everything with his disciples, telling him that the bread was his body, and to eat that bread. And that was to be done as a remembrance, just like the Passover was every year. And he went on to talk to him about the cup and how to drink the cup, and to do that until the Lord's death, till he comes. Till he comes, we should keep this supper. That's in verse 26. Now, in verse 27 says, wherefore whosoever eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord. So that, that speaks to baptism if we didn't get baptized. Now, how do I tie that in with baptism? Give me just a moment. We'll go back to that. But we have to eat and drink not unworthily, because we can bring on sickness to ourselves by doing that. And that's in verse 29. Not discerning the Lord's body, not understanding the Lord's body. Now, if you've been at war with the flesh over the last year, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take of the Lord's Supper. Doesn't mean that. But we have to be able to discern the Lord's body. We have to have our minds in the right place. We have to be spiritually in the right place. And it tells us how to do that. It says in verse 28, let a man examine himself. Examine yourself. Be remorseful. Don't be full of pride. Be loving. Be charitable. Have that spirit alive in your life. Be a good worker for God. Be doing things. Be active. Don't always put your job first. Put God first. Don't always put all these other things in your life first. Always put God first and take care of the things for Him first, and then let all these other things get done through His blessings in order. Seek after heavenly things first, and everything will be added. I see some smiles out there. We all will fight this battle. We all have to be reminded. Yeah. The world would pull us away. Put the Lord's work first. And a chance to witness to somebody. That's much more important than so many other things. It says in verse 31, for if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. Alright? So, work on our own, be a little bit hard on yourself, and then God doesn't have to be. But when we are judged, we are chastened of the Lord, that we should not be condemned in the world. So if we get caught up in things in the world, and all of a sudden God kind of yanks a rug out from under us, that's His way of chastening. I've been chastened of the Lord in my life. There's times in my life when my pursuit of success maybe was too important. Or material things. And so as I collected and accumulated those things, God just went and took them away. Well, that's chastening. but it brought me back to God. And at no time did it, did I ever lose the ability to be with him at the Lord's Supper. Right? If you have problems with your friends in your life and they become, too much of an influence, all of a sudden one day, somebody's going to turn around and hurt you, and you're going to go, well, why did they do that? Because you're being chastened. Because the Lord is allowing that thing in the world to turn around and correct you so that you can come back to Him. That's okay. It's all okay. Because we always come back to the Lord. All right. So we're chastened by the Lord so that we're not condemned with the world, but that we might be partakers of His body and His blood, that we might have life in us, that when He comes, He will restore us into His kingdom. Is that good? Okay. So, back to this taking of the Lord's Supper unworthily. Well, here's an example of how. If you're not baptized and you take of the emblems, what you want to do is you want to get baptized first, and here's why. Remember Israel, only the circumcised ones would take of the feast? Colossians 2:11 tells us, in whom ye are also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, and putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, buried with Him in baptism, wherein you are also risen with Him through the faith of the operation of God, who hath raised Him from the dead. And ye being dead in your sins and the uncircumcision of your flesh, hath He quickened together with Him, having forgiven you all your trespasses. And He's blotting out the handwriting of all ordinances, not the Ten Commandments, but the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to His cross. There is an operation that God makes without hands, called baptism. And baptism is the cutting away of the old dead flesh, coming into a newness of life. It's the same as circumcision, except circumcision was a foreshadow of baptism today, just as the Paschal Lamb was a foreshadow of Jesus. And so we take baptism on to cut away the old dead flesh, and cut away the world from our life. All right, let's move into the actual emblems of the Lord's Supper. I think you understand the Lord's Supper very well. And since we understand it, we're in a good place to take it. Well, first of all, look at John chapter 13 and verse 1. And that reads, Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that His hour was come, that He should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved His own which were in the world, He loved them unto the end. And the supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas, Simon's son, to betray Him. And Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into His hands, and that He was come from God and went to God. Jesus, in verse 4, rises from supper and laid aside His garments and took a towel and girded Himself. After that He poureth water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith He was girded. And so at this time, what we'll do now is we'll break and we'll have a foot wash.